Okay, so chapter 48 is all about the nervous system, and we are going to look at the human nervous system in particular. So the responses of the nervous system often help to minimize changes in the internal environment. So it helps to maintain homeostasis. The activities of the nervous system are essential to maintaining homeostasis, a constant internal environment. So examples that the nervous system help to do is maintain heart rate, blood pressure, breathing rate are examples of that. So there are basically three major functions for the nervous system. The first one is sensory input. So signals from the outside get taken to what we call an integration center by the peripheral nervous system, or PNS. We're going to talk about that in just a second. And then the next one is integration. Signals or information are interpreted by your central nervous system. And then motor output. The central nervous system tells muscles and glands what to do. So let's look at this picture here. So we have here, let's do blue here, your eye. So this is your sensory input. When it says signals from the outside get taken to integration center by your peripheral nervous system. So this is your eye. This is the sensor. Is your eye. And so this arrow represents sensory input. So you see something, and so that information is transmitted. So we have what are called sensory neurons. They transmit info or information to your central nervous system, to your CNS. Peripheral, let's talk about the words here, peripheral nervous system and central nervous system. So your central nervous system are your brain and your spinal cord. So it's kind of central in your body. Your peripheral nervous system is things that part of your nervous system that flow into or out of that central part. So therefore, your sensory input here, you have neurons that are going to, which are cells of the nervous system, that are going to take that information to your brain and spinal cord. That part right there, so that is part of your peripheral nervous system. So from here to here is your peripheral nervous system. And so they just say PNS for short. And then your brain and spinal cord here, this part is your central nervous system. CNS. All right, so your sensory neurons are part of that peripheral nervous system. And then you have... Then let's pick a different color here. Inside your brain and spinal cord is that second part, integration. So let's put here, I'm going to put sensory input here in blue that matches with this. Integration we'll do in purple. So integration. So the sensory neurons take that information to your brain and spinal cord where integration occurs. Integration. So notice here you have arrows like this. All right, so, and that's your integration part here. We're going to see that there are interneurons that are in the brain and the spinal cord. And we're going to write them now. So there are sensory neurons that can communicate to interneurons, which then can communicate to your motor neurons. So this part right here is your brain and spinal cord. Let's do red here. Do what's called, let's do this here, your motor output. there are neurons then that communicate to your muscles, so in this case here your calf, to begin to run. So this is like you see a dog, unleashed dog coming after you. So therefore your sensory input, your eyes, your neurons communicate with your brain, which then communicate with your motor neurons to communicate with your muscles to then contract and run or get out of the way so you don't get bit by the dog. So these are motor neurons. These guys transmit info from the CNS to muscles, to muscle cells, let's say. And then the cell that they're communicating with are called the effector cells. So you have the sensor up here, and this is your effector cells in your muscles. And that is the three major parts and purposes of the nervous system. So if we turn our page here, we have a couple of pictures here that just kind of show you the general overview of the vertebrate nervous system, like our nervous system. So the central nervous system, as we just said, is composed of the brain and the spinal cord. So here's the brain and the spinal cord. I know it's kind of small for you to see it here, but any other things that you need to know, we'll look at it in bigger pictures later. So brain and spinal cord. And then your peripheral nervous system are nerves that are the motor and sensory nerves that communicate between your central nervous system and the rest of your body, kind of like what we just talked about. And so what this shows is there are different parts of your spinal cord that that communicate with different neurons that go to different parts of your body. And so like here we have the eye, then your tear glands in your nose, in your mouth, and your salivary glands. So notice that all of those neurons that communicate with those parts of the body are up near those parts of the body. And then we have our heart and our lungs, all right, and then the motor neurons that come out of the spinal cord will communicate, or neurons that come out of the spinal cord will communicate with those parts of the body. Then you have your stomach, blood vessels of the all the different parts of the abdomen, liver, pancreas, adrenal gland, small intestine, large intestine. So basically all of your digestive system there. Then we look at kidneys, bladder, and so on. And so you can see that there are different parts of the spinal cord that communicate with different parts of the body, and that kind of goes down like that. So this next picture also is just another way to look at what we just looked at. So here's your sensor, and so notice here I got this from the MCAT review. This is for the test to get into medical school. So here is your sensory input, part of your PNS, and so that would be like your eyeball. Another way to say that is afferent. And then here's your central nervous system, your brain, and your spinal cord that then communicate via your motor into your effective cells. Notice here, though, something different is that the motor, that there are actually two divisions, I should say, of the motor output. And the first one is somatic and then autonomic. Notice here somatic part of the motor output is the one that actually stimulates muscle cells. Your autonomic, it also has two subdivisions. The sympathetic and parasympathetic are the involuntary muscles and organs. So this is voluntary, involuntary. So like your heart is a muscle that is involuntary, that you cannot control. You know, when your stomach contracts to churn your food with the enzymes and so on, that's something that you can't control. You can't think and say, oh, stomach, stop, contracting. That is not something that you can control, so that's involuntary. So those are your different subdivisions of that. So let's look at specifically about your central nervous system. So as we saw, it links the sensory and the motor functions of the peripheral nervous system together. On the spinal cord, let's right here, spinal cord, integrates simple responses, and carries information to and from the brain. So, so, so it helps to, if something comes to the spinal cord, takes it to the brain and back. Sometimes the neuron can communicate to the spinal cord, and it actually goes not to the brain first, but then can affect a motor neuron, and therefore kind of bypass the brain. All right, so that's what it means. Integrates simple responses, and then also can carry information to and from the brain. The brain is located at the top of the spinal cord. It's the center of basically everything: homeostasis, perception, movement, intellect, emotions, and so on. So the vertebrate brain, it kind of got put off on the other side here. There's three sections: the forebrain, which is called the cerebrum; the midbrain, senses visual and olfactory stimuli. Olfactory is your sense of smell. Your hindbrain controls involuntary actions. So the forebrain, the cerebrum. So forebrain, the cerebrum. All right, so first part of that is the cerebrum, center of intelligence. If we look here, let's look at the picture. Well, actually, let's wait and look at the picture here. I thought the picture showed you something a little bit different. There are two hemispheres for your brain, and you've probably heard of this before. Two hemispheres. The left hemisphere is kind of involved in speech, language, and calculation. And the right hemisphere is artistic ability and spatial perception. And so the two parts, or the two hemispheres, can communicate through something called the corpus callosum. So that's in the center here. And so that's how they, cross communicate.